Thanks for clicking on the video. What the experts say is that I have about 20 seconds to get your attention.
So I am gonna add some auto-tune to this and make me sound like I can sing, even though clearly I can't hold a tune. And also other things, I don't know how many seconds it's been, but that's all we need to know.
Alright, so
What do I hate about an iMac?
Alright, but seriously, what are the things that I hate about that iMac back there? Because the list is a little bit longer than I was originally thinking it was going to be. Originally, when I first got this, I was very, very excited about it. I thought it was awesome. I was super happy. It was really fun to use. I'd never used an iMac before. But after using it for a while, I can give a better and not more honest, but a more accurate depiction of using an iMac in 2019, especially a 2014 iMac in 2019. So here are my list of complaints. Normally, I try to do pros and cons, but the pros and cons list sometimes gets old, and I don't want to really say any pros today because there are pros, but honestly, there are a lot of cons. So to start, let's start with that display. There is a lot of ghosting effect with that Retina display sitting behind me. It is a 5K panel, but when I go into settings, it says 3840 by 2160. Now, in another version of the settings, it says a 5K display. So which one is it? Is it a scaling issue? Is it a 5K display? Or is it a 4K display? What even is it? Is it even running at the full 5K resolution? I've looked up things about that, and I don't know if I'm searching the wrong things, but everything I read is nowhere near what I'm looking for when I am searching, like, why is my 5K iMac running at 4K? It's like, can it support a 4K monitor? This and this and this. It's like, no. It seems to be running at 4K, at least that's what the settings are telling me. You obviously have seen that in the video, B-roll over this complaining video. Next is going to be the lack of trackpad. Now, I do have an external trackpad, but I have an older external trackpad, which is the cheaper version, which is the one I would normally suggest getting. But after using that for a while, if you don't use a trackpad with macOS, you're not really getting the full experience of macOS. In my opinion, at least the way the operating system seems to have been built, it was built around a trackpad using the trackpad in mind, which would make sense because Apple wants a locked-in, closed-down ecosystem of computers, and having a trackpad be the main focal point really pushes the laptops, which really pushes no upgrades to the CPU or GPU, and barely even any upgrades for any computer, even if it was like an upgradable computer. Normally the upgrades are only RAM and storage and maybe like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. So in this case, really, it's not surprising to me that the trackpad is such a huge focal point, and I love the trackpad, but at the same time, I hate the fact that I'm using an external trackpad, and it's just not working quite as good. The problem is that it's battery powered, so who has batteries? I know I don't, so I'm like been pulling batteries from all over the place because they keep dying and dying and dying. And while using that trackpad is fine, I noticed on my specific one, I'm sure this is probably a problem with these versions of the trackpad, it's that they begin to stick. So if I click on the right side of the thing or the left side of the trackpad, it'll just click and hold. So if I'm just trying to click something and then I'm just moving my mouse over, it might click and drag it over, which can be really frustrating and slow me down. So I stopped using the trackpad. And not using a trackpad in macOS sucks. I'd rather use a Windows computer. There's one right there. Although I probably won't be using that one. I just picked it up because it was super cheap. 8600K, 16 gigabytes of RGB RAM, a Z370 motherboard, power supply, and a case, and a very nice water cooler for $360. I'll probably make a video on that sometime soon. But at the end of the day, the trackpad is really important to macOS, and if you don't have an external trackpad or your external trackpad doesn't work very well, it doesn't work very well with an iMac, and in my opinion, it makes the iMac stupid to even own if there are more powerful MacBook Pros that have a smaller screen, but on the CPU side are more powerful. Next, we'll go in terms of power. Let's talk about this computer. It's running an i5 4690. That's pretty much enough for what I do. 1080p, 8-bit, sometimes 10-bit video, sometimes 4K. If I'm getting really extreme 4K, it definitely chokes up in Premiere Pro. But when doing 1080p, I've noticed it works really well. I've had a lot of fun using it in 1080p video editing. However, the problem is that if I'm not video editing and if I go into Photoshop, it can't even handle a simple image in Photoshop like a 1080p image. It's an absolute joke. It lags like crazy. In fact, there was a time like a week ago, I had up my second monitor, which is sitting right here. I'm packing and I'm moving from this apartment to our new house. So obviously everything's a little bit hectic, but I had this monitor sitting next to it that was a 1440p connected with an external GPU sitting back there, and those were working really well. And what I was forced to do was, instead of using the good display, or the 5K display, I had to take that and move it over to the 1440p ultra wide display and have that be my monitor, because the 5K display wasn't even being used that well, which was so frustrating. And it couldn't even be powered by the internal GPU or the external GPU. And I don't believe the external GPU was pumping it back into that display, because that's a problem with Thunderbolt 2, eGPUs, and iMacs. Next is the hard drive. While having 2 terabytes of storage is nice on the computer, I have 3 terabytes of external storage that I've collected over the years. So having a lot of storage isn't a big deal to me. I've always had plenty of storage. 3 terabytes is more than what I need. And honestly, after using this computer, that hard drive in there is somewhat noticeable sometimes. You can sort of tell when it's stored on the hard drive and when it's stored on the SSD, especially if I'm video editing, or if I'm just like clicking an app and I haven't opened that app for a while and decide to move it off the SSD onto the hard drive. It like opens up super slowly, especially apps that are like large. So Adobe Audition, which I don't use that much, and Photoshop, which I don't use that much, will literally take like a very long time to open. I mean, it's not like 3 hours to open, but it's a noticeably longer amount of time. Next is one of the most annoying things, but I understand why it is the way that it is, and that's the ports. Having to set back and try to hook my hand underneath in order to access the ports is super frustrating. I know it's kind of a lazy complaint, but after using this for a while, that is really annoying. I don't know why they have them back there. I know why they have them back there, because if you look at it from straight on, it's perfectly symmetrical. It's like the Apple Magic Mouse. It's like people complain about the charging port being on the bottom, but at the end of the day, one, it's a stupid and lazy complaint. Come up with something better than that. And two, if you look at the Magic Mouse, it's perfectly symmetrical, and if they were to put a charging port in the front, it would not be symmetrical. I totally understand why they put it at the bottom. It's a beautiful design and a beautiful mouse, in my opinion. And the iMac is a beautiful design, and it's a beautiful computer, and it looks amazing. Like, sitting and looking at it, even just looking at it now, it's a gorgeous machine. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a beautiful machine. It's made by Apple. It normally is. But having access to those ports through the back, or having to like sit up and hunch over, it's so annoying. It's not a big deal when you first start to use it, but after doing it for a while and you're trying to find a file on like a specific SSD or specific hard drive or a specific SD card or something, it's so hard to keep unplugging and plugging back in, unplugging, plugging back in. Where do I put my headphones? You're trying to feel around, you're definitely scratching up the back of it. It's kind of frustrating to do that, especially because you know how much these things are worth. So to feel like you're ruining it is really frustrating, and I don't like that. But those are my biggest complaints about the iMac. At the end of the day, it's a great computer. I mean, every computer is amazing. That's the thing. It's like, the reason I have so much fun doing this, and the reason I can go from Windows to Mac OS, and from Mac OS to Windows, and build a PC, and use an Apple computer, and use a MacBook, and use an iMac, is because all computers are amazing. And I can just look at something and be like, this is amazing. People complain about Apple computers so much because there's this ridiculous Apple standard, and they should be held to it because they are the best tech company, and I think everybody sort of knows that, and they don't want to admit that it's the best. They're like, well, Apple, this is stupid. It's like, dude, you're just nitpicking. At the end of the day, Apple makes great computers. Yeah, sometimes they might not be the most reliable, but every computer has a problem. And sometimes their phones are too expensive, and sometimes their computers are too expensive. Well, all the times. But at the end of the day, you're paying for so much more. Download GarageBand and look at all of the free instrumentals that they just give you. Like, Apple gives you way more in their software than in their hardware, especially when you look at the pricing. And if you're able to utilize all of the software that Apple supplies you, then you're definitely going to get your money's worth. Thank you guys for watching the video. I'm Scott with Techno Eclipse. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Sorry for a little bit sparse schedule if you saw my post today. Thank you guys for watching the video again, and I will see you in the next one. We're moving into our house sometime soon. Peace out.